Late one summer evening on the south side, word moved through Englewood about shots fired near 70th and Princeton, where folks claimed a tall shadow stepped from a dark vehicle before everything went quiet. Nobody on that block ever put his name on paper, yet people kept saying the shooter stood almost 7 feet tall, then vanished toward Lowe while sirens rushed from the 7th district. Police reports from those years list shell casings, victims, unanswered questions, though street talk kept circling one nickname that sounded more myth than man. Some called him Loweko, others said Loco, while older heads whispered Devil of Lowe, which makes you wonder whether that night belonged to a person or a story that kept growing. This is where we step back, since before the rumors stacked up, there was a neighborhood shaping every move long before anybody feared that name. To understand how a figure like Gene Green could emerge from Englewood, you have to rewind past drill music into history that started long before YouTube ever carried Chicago's street politics across the world. In the late 1950s, African-American families moved into Englewood after expressway construction forced relocation, which created tight clusters of blocks where protection often came from organized crews rather than city officials. Around 1959, teenagers Bobby Longstreet, Laverne Longstreet, Andrew Howard, and later David Barksdale helped form what became the Disciples, a group that began as neighborhood defense but evolved into a serious street organization. By the mid-'80s, that original structure had fractured into two dominant factions known as the Black Disciples and the Gangster Disciples, with Barksdale's legacy shaping BD identity while Larry Hoover's leadership defined the GD side. Once the Black Gangster Disciple Nation officially split in 1989, alliances hardened across Englewood, Woodlawn, Washington Park, and surrounding neighborhoods, which meant the color blue no longer guaranteed unity on every corner. As those lines solidified, territory started determining loyalty as much as family, so blocks like 65th and Lowe developed identities that outsiders rarely understood, but locals carried like birth certificates. Low Life, sometimes spelled Low Life, controlled a tight pocket listed by gang mapping profiles as 65th to 66th between Lowe and Union, a few streets that held more tension than many entire suburbs. That small stretch aligned with nearby BD strongholds such as Lameron, near 5700 South Normal, and Parkway Gardens, later called O Block after O.D. Perry's 2011 killing. On the other side of the feud stood gangster disciple sets like Brick Squad, Mac Block, and others that occupied adjacent territory, which meant every bus stop, corner store, or basketball court could double as a front line. Chicago police data from the early 2000s showed Englewood consistently ranking among the city's highest homicide totals, while residents relied on their set for identity in ways that made outside intervention feel distant. By the time the 2000s rolled into the early 2010s, social media added another layer to this geography, since tweets and videos now mapped rival presence in real time, turning simple movement across blocks into public statements. In that environment, kids growing up around Lowe life did not see gang affiliation as a headline, since it functioned as a daily structure woven into school routes, family ties, and social codes. When historians discuss systemic neglect in Chicago's South Side, they often point to disinvestment, segregated housing, and limited economic opportunity, which quietly shaped choices long before any trigger got pulled. Out of that setting stepped a tall, quiet kid named Gene Green, who did not yet carry a nickname, but already stood out in hallways where most teenagers blended into the crowd. Gene Green was reportedly born around 1992 or 1993 in Chicago, though public records about his childhood remain limited, which means much of what we know comes from people who grew up around 65th and Lowe. Those who remember him describe a teenager whose height separated him from classmates early, since by high school he reportedly approached 7 feet, forcing teachers to look up during attendance. Former associates say he had the frame for basketball and could have pursued athletics seriously, yet no verified scholarship offers appear in public documentation tied to his name. Instead of gym trophies, his identity slowly linked to low life as he spent more time around older members who viewed physical presence as an asset in neighborhood disputes. Friends from Englewood later described him as quiet rather than loud, which often translated into a type of respect different from the social media heavy personalities gaining attention through rap videos. In street culture, silence can signal calculation. So when someone with that stature moved without unnecessary chatter, people noticed, especially on blocks already tense from BD and GD rivalry. During the early 2010s, while drill artists like Chief Keef from Parkway Gardens and Lil Durk from Lamron rose nationally, young men in smaller sets such as Low Life felt pressure to hold their ground locally. That climate meant reputations formed not through interviews, but through whispers. And once a name started circulating in connection with conflicts, it stuck, whether confirmed or not. As Gene Green moved deeper into low life during his mid-teens, stories began attaching to him in ways that outpaced documented facts, since no major arrest records tied him to high-profile crimes at that stage. Yet people on nearby blocks claimed he carried himself like someone prepared for whatever came, which in Englewood often meant standing firm during disputes over territory. The nickname Loco reportedly surfaced first among peers, while Loeco became a variation heard online, and Devil of Lowe followed later once rumors expanded beyond a single incident. At that point, the legend had not fully formed, though the foundation already existed in a neighborhood where height, silence, and loyalty could turn an ordinary young man into something that sounded larger than life. By the early 2010s, Chicago's underground conflicts started leaking into mainstream awareness once drill music pushed neighborhood rivalries into headphones across the country. Around 2011, Chief Keef, born Keith Cozart, released tracks like Love Sosa and I Don't Like while living in Parkway Gardens, later called O Block after Odie Perry's death. Those records carried raw references to real blocks such as 64th and King Drive, which meant listeners suddenly heard coded geography that previously stayed inside city limits. As Keef's visibility grew, other Black Disciple affiliates like Lil Reese and Lil Durk from Lamron followed, turning Englewood and surrounding neighborhoods into recognizable names far beyond Illinois. That exposure reshaped perception, since what used to be local tension now felt like a global stage where every lyric doubled as a message to rivals. Once those songs hit YouTube and world star hip-hop, social media began amplifying reputations faster than a word of mouth ever could, which meant online clout started influencing real movement on the streets. Teenagers who once earned respect through block activity suddenly saw views and comments turning into a new currency, so posting a diss could bring attention overnight. Journalists like Emma Graham Harrison noted in 2012 that Chicago's gang politics were becoming inseparable from digital culture, where tweets, videos, and live uploads turned street disputes into public performances. That environment pressured younger members to prove themselves visibly, since silence online could look like weakness even if nothing changed locally. Gangster disciple circles reacted quickly, especially within Englewood sets like Brick Squad that already clashed with BD strongholds around Lamron and Parkway Gardens. Instead of staying quiet, younger GD figures leaned into diss culture, creating tracks that directly mocked BD names and symbols without hiding intentions. Among them stood Joseph Coleman, known as Lil Jojo, a teenager tied to Brick Squad who understood how quickly controversy traveled through social media algorithms. In 2012, he released BDK 300K, a remix flipping Chief Keef's 300 into a diss where BDK stood for Black Disciple Killer, which immediately escalated tensions across multiple neighborhoods. That track did more than insult rivals, since it gave teenagers a viral slogan that traveled through tweets, videos, and street conversations, setting the stage for a moment that would ripple far beyond one afternoon. Once BDK started circulating online, friction between Brick Squad and Black Disciple sets intensified quickly, especially around Englewood corridors where overlapping territories already created daily tension. Videos surfaced showing Lil Jojo riding through areas linked to BD presence, including stretches near Lamron and Parkway Gardens, while shouting taunts aimed at figures like Lil Reese. One widely discussed confrontation reportedly captured Reese exchanging heated words during a street encounter, which then spread across YouTube and Twitter within hours. That digital replay kept replaying the conflict for viewers who had never set foot in Chicago, turning local hostility into a spectacle watched nationwide. On September 4th, 2012, Jojo posted tweets placing himself on the South Side, including a message around the 6,900 block of South Princeton that investigators later referenced in multiple reports. Earlier that evening, he had been active online, sharing his location in real time, which later became a focal point in discussions about how social media intersected with street violence. According to police timelines, around 7:30 that night, Jojo was riding on the back of a bicycle near 70th and Princeton when a vehicle approached and gunfire erupted suddenly. Surveillance footage, later described in media coverage, showed him attempting to flee north before collapsing on the pavement, after which emergency responders transported him to the University of Chicago Medical Center, where he was pronounced dead at 18. Officers recovered shell casings at the scene, though no shooter was officially identified, leaving the case unresolved despite widespread attention. Almost immediately, rumors started moving through Englewood, since online forums and neighborhood chatter began pointing toward a tall Black disciple figure linked to low-life territory. Some associates of Gene Green hinted indirectly on social media that someone from Lowe handled retaliation, though none of those claims ever appeared in court records or official police statements. Investigative reporting over the years has maintained that no one was charged in Jojo's killing, which keeps the distinction between documented fact and street belief important here. Still, within local conversations, the idea that a towering low-life member played a role kept resurfacing, feeding a narrative that attached to Green even without confirmation. From that point forward, the nickname Devil of Lowe started surfacing more frequently in online discussions, since people began tying a mysterious, tall enforcer to one of the most talked about killings of the drill era. Whether accurate or not, Jojo's death marked a shift where myth started growing alongside reality, giving Gene Green a reputation that stretched far beyond Englewood. As drill music continued evolving, that single night became a reference point whenever conversations about low life surfaced, locking his name into a story still debated years later. After Lil Jojo's killing stayed unsolved, a strange gap opened where official silence met loud street storytelling, which often creates space where legends start forming without anyone verifying the details. In Englewood, that gap filled quickly through Facebook pages, YouTube breakdowns, and neighborhood retellings that recycled the same whispers until repetition started feeling like confirmation. Smaller channels began uploading narrated slideshows about Chicago's drill era, placing Gene Green's name beside incidents without citing police files, which slowly shaped a digital folklore that people treated like history. Once those videos circulated widely, comment sections turned into rumor factories where users swapped secondhand stories that blurred into something resembling collective memory. Another layer came from Chicago's long-standing no-snitch culture, where witnesses often avoid statements even when shootings happen in daylight near homes, which leaves cases frozen without courtroom conclusions. When victims refuse cooperation or bystanders stay silent, investigators rarely close files, so the streets end up writing their own verdicts without paperwork. In neighborhoods like Englewood, that dynamic has existed for decades, meaning rumors sometimes carry more weight than documented timelines among people living there. Over time, fear starts moving faster than facts, especially when nobody publicly contradicts the story being repeated online. Gene Green's physical presence intensified that effect, since standing close to 7 feet made anonymity almost impossible, which naturally tied his image to any mystery involving a tall shooter. People remembered seeing him around 65th and Lowe or near Halstead corridors, so whenever a description mentioned unusual height, listeners filled in the blanks themselves. That mental shortcut allowed speculation to attach directly to him even when details remained unclear, turning coincidence into a perceived pattern through repetition. As those stories stacked up, the name Loco stayed common locally, while Loeco gained traction online, both feeding a darker nickname that would soon travel farther. By the mid-2010s, the phrase "Devil of Lowe" started appearing in comment threads and street conversations, reflecting how fear reshapes language over time into something symbolic rather than literal. The nickname fused low-life territory with the idea of an unstoppable figure, which made it memorable enough to stick across platforms and neighborhoods. Once a label like that circulates widely, it rarely fades, even without evidence, since mythology tends to outlive facts in environments shaped by unresolved violence. From there, the reputation started carrying weight on its own, setting the stage for years where nearly any rumor involving Englewood violence circled back toward the same towering name. By the mid-2010s, several violent incidents across Englewood began drawing online speculation, though separating confirmed details from street attribution requires careful attention to actual reporting. On January 26, 2017, 17-year-old Hussein Parr was shot along the 7000 block of South Princeton, according to CBS Chicago summaries describing a dark vehicle pulling up before multiple shots struck him. He was transported to Stroger Hospital and later pronounced dead, while police reported no suspects, which left the case open without arrests. Soon after, forum discussions and neighborhood posts began linking the killing to low-life tensions, though no official documents tied Gene Green to that shooting. In the absence of arrests, speculation kept circulating online, turning a single unresolved case into another building block within Englewood's growing web of rumor. 2 years later, another case added to the growing speculation when a man identified in community databases as Donovan Harris, sometimes called Lil Don, was killed on February 10, 2019, near the 6600 block of South Harvard. News summaries described an assailant approaching Harris outside a residence and firing multiple shots that struck his chest and extremities before he died at the University of Chicago Medical Center. Again, investigators released a few details, which created another vacuum where rumors filled the silence almost immediately. Online conversations repeated the same pattern, attaching the Devil of Lowe nickname to the story, despite a lack of formal charges. That same summer, discussions expanded after a June 12, 2019, shooting on the 6600 block of South Halstead that reportedly left Terrence Sewell, known as Savo in some accounts, fatally wounded. Documentation around that incident remains thinner in mainstream outlets, though archive posts and secondary reports confirm a fatal shooting occurred in that area around midnight. As with earlier cases, speculation spread faster than verified updates, placing the same towering figure at the center without investigators naming suspects publicly. Each repetition strengthened the perception that multiple unsolved cases shared a common thread, even when documentation stayed inconclusive. What made these years especially influential was the pattern itself, since every unresolved incident added another layer to an already growing narrative surrounding low-life mythology. Without arrests or courtroom testimony, stories kept stacking until rumor began functioning like evidence in everyday conversations across Englewood. People rarely revisited original sources, so repetition replaced verification, allowing legend to evolve almost independently from documented facts. By the end of the decade, the absence of charges had done something unusual, turning uncertainty into mystique while pushing the Devil of Lowe identity deeper into Chicago's drill-era folklore. As the Devil of Lowe nickname spread online, people who actually crossed paths with Gene Green often described someone very different from the larger-than-life figure circulating in comment sections. Former neighbors around 65th and Lowe remembered a quiet presence who did not chase attention the way drill artists did, which stood out in a city where notoriety often comes from visibility. Several accounts from Englewood residents say he moved calmly through familiar blocks, rarely engaging outsiders unless tension already existed nearby. That reserved energy created an odd contrast, since stories about violent capability grew louder even while his public footprint stayed small. Friends from lower life territory sometimes portrayed him as deeply loyal to his immediate circle, emphasizing consistency rather than chaos when speaking about how he carried himself day to day. In neighborhoods where loyalty can define survival, that trait often earns lasting respect even without public accolades or viral recognition. People who claim to know him mention discipline and how he navigated his surroundings, suggesting he preferred staying within familiar zones rather than chasing attention across the city. That pattern helped to reinforce the perception that whatever reputation existed came more from whispers than self-promotion. Another recurring detail involves how rarely he appeared in mainstream footage, especially compared with contemporaries tied to the drill scene who frequently surfaced in videos or interviews. While names like Chief Keef, Lil Durk, and later King Von became cultural figures through cameras and microphones, Gene Green's image remained largely absent from major media coverage. That absence contributed to mystique, since unfamiliarity tends to amplify imagination when people fill gaps with speculation. Over time, silence itself became part of the legend, turning lack of footage into something interpreted as deliberate avoidance. This contradiction between low visibility and high notoriety made the Devil of Lowe persona feel almost abstract, existing more vividly in stories than in documented appearances. On one side stood neighborhood recollections describing a quiet individual rooted in low-life loyalty, while on the other side, the online narratives painted an almost mythical enforcer. That gap between lived experience and digital storytelling created tension that kept fascination alive even without clear evidence. In many ways, the mystery surrounding Gene Green grew not from confirmed actions, but from the distance between what people saw and what they believed. To understand how that gap widened, it helps to look at how Chicago's violence entered the digital age, where phones and algorithms reshaped how conflict spread beyond physical neighborhoods. By the early 2010s, platforms like Twitter, YouTube, and later Instagram allowed street disputes to unfold in public view, transforming local rivalries into global spectacles almost overnight. Journalists covering the period, including reports highlighted by ABC News, pointed out that social media did not create gang conflict, but magnified its reach dramatically. Once videos and tweets started circulating widely, every insult gained permanence, replayed endlessly by viewers far removed from Englewood streets. Lil Jojo's 2012 tweets announcing his location before his death became one of the most cited examples of how online exposure could intersect with real danger, illustrating the risks of broadcasting movement in active conflict zones. That moment showed younger audiences how quickly digital bravado could translate into real consequences, shaping behavior across Chicago neighborhoods. Afterward, rappers and affiliates increasingly used posts as signals of presence or dominance, which often escalated tension without any face-to-face confrontation. In that environment, online beef stopped being symbolic and began functioning like real-time territorial messaging. Media analysts later described Chicago's drill era as one of the first major cases where urban violence and algorithm-driven visibility collided, since controversial content naturally gained more engagement online. The more shocking the story sounded, the faster it traveled, which meant rumors often spread further than verified reports from local outlets. As a result, figures like Gene Green became part of narratives shaped less by documentation and more by viral storytelling patterns. Once a name entered that ecosystem, repetition alone could elevate it into something resembling established history. Within that digital battlefield, the Devil of Lowe identity evolved into a product of both street reality and online amplification, shaped by a feedback loop between local whispers and global curiosity. Each retelling strengthened mythology, especially when audiences unfamiliar with Englewood relied solely on viral breakdowns for context. Over time, the boundary between rumor and record blurred, allowing speculation to settle into accepted lore without formal confirmation. In that sense, Gene Green's legend reflects not only one neighborhood's history, but also a broader era where digital storytelling transformed how violence is remembered. On March 27, 2021, Gene Green died at 28, yet the moment passed without the kind of headlines that usually follow a name surrounded by so much street mythology. Major outlets like the Chicago Tribune or Sun-Times never ran front-page obituaries, leaving the news largely confined to neighborhood circles and niche online spaces. Instead of police scanners or breaking alerts, confirmation surfaced through gang index listings and scattered social media posts mentioning Loeco's passing. One entry on the Chicago Gang Index labeled the cause simply as natural causes, which surprised people who expected violence to close a story filled with violent rumors. That single phrase opened a wave of competing theories, since the lack of detailed reporting left room for speculation across forums and neighborhood conversations. Some posts suggested lingering complications from earlier injuries, while others floated overdose claims tied to substances like lean, which had already claimed figures such as Fredo Santana in 2018. Another rumor claimed cancer, while a few voices insisted a heart condition ran quietly in the background long before outsiders ever noticed. None of those explanations ever reached official confirmation, and no public autopsy or police statement clarified the matter, which kept the cause unresolved even years later. What made the moment striking was the contrast between the reputation that surrounded him and the stillness of how the story ended. For someone associated with years of whispered violence, people expected a dramatic conclusion, yet reality delivered a quiet exit that barely registered beyond Englewood's immediate orbit. There were no widely circulated crime scene photos, no televised briefings, no dramatic timelines reconstructing final hours. Instead, the update arrived in fragments, passed between accounts that rarely intersected with mainstream coverage. News of his death traveled the same way many rumors about him had spread, moving through the word of mouth and scattered uploads rather than traditional journalism. Some people learned through Instagram, tributes from individuals claiming neighborhood ties, while others discovered the update through archived gang forums that tracked fallen members. Without a centralized announcement, Each retelling carried slight variations, reinforcing the same uncertainty that defined his reputation while alive. In the end, the Devil of Lowe narrative did not close with a definitive answer, leaving the final chapter shaped more by ambiguity than clarity. Looking back, the story of Gene Green sits at the uneasy intersection between documented events and stories that grew without courtroom validation. Verified records confirm Englewood affiliations, drill-era timelines, and unsolved cases that frame the environment surrounding his name. At the same time, many of the most extreme claims about the Devil of Lowe rely on secondhand accounts that never pass through official scrutiny. That tension between fact and folklore defines how his narrative survives today. Even years after his death, his name still surfaces in online discussions whenever people revisit Chicago's drill era or debate unsolved conflicts from the 2010s. YouTube retrospectives, Reddit threads, and comment sections keep recycling the same stories, often blending confirmed incidents with speculation until distinctions blur. For younger viewers discovering those breakdowns without local context, the mythology can appear indistinguishable from documented history. That digital afterlife ensures the legend continues, evolving long after the man himself disappeared from the streets. Within the broader drill era, his story reflects how certain figures become symbols, while many victims fade into statistics rarely revisited outside local memory. Names like Lil Jojo, Donovan Harris, or Hussein Parr appear briefly in reports, yet sustained narratives often gravitate toward the rumored perpetrators rather than the lives lost. This imbalance reveals how storytelling naturally amplifies mystery over mourning, especially in environments shaped by unresolved violence. As a result, the legends tend to grow louder while individual tragedies quietly recede. Understanding that dynamic shifts how the Devil of Lowe's story feels when placed beside the wider history of Chicago's South Side. The same forces that fueled drill music visibility also reshaped how violence gets remembered, turning local conflicts into global narratives shaped by algorithms rather than archives. In that ecosystem, myth spreads faster than documentation, allowing speculation to harden into something resembling truth over time. That pattern explains why certain names linger even when official records remain thin. If you circle back to that opening image of a tall figure fading into an Englewood night, the lingering question remains whether people remember a person or a story that kept rewriting itself. Somewhere between the police files that never named the shooter and the comment threads that filled every gap, Gene Green became both subject and symbol. His legacy now lives in that gray space where rumor overlaps reality, shaped by the same streets that created him. And maybe that is the real ending here, not a final answer, but a reminder that some legends survive precisely because certainty never arrives.